Good morning. This is Mark Levine. I'm the Deputy Director of the New York State Association of Counties. I want to welcome you this morning to our webinar on bringing solar to county airports. Last year, our partnership with the Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance, MEGA, went out to bid publicly to procure a solar partner. And after a vetting process, they chose SolarCity. Since this partnership began, we have an unprecedented opportunity in New York State to embrace the long-term benefits of solar with little or no short-term investment. Last month, the governor announced a pledge of $1 billion in funding to spur solar investments. He wants New York State to be a leader in solar energy. We have been working with MEGA and SolarCity to make solar possible for counties and local governments across the state. As it turns out, airports are an ideal location for solar projects, which is why we have set up this webinar this morning. I am pleased to introduce our two panelists today. The first is Kate Sherwood from our partner in government accounts at SolarCity, and the second is Greg Principato, who works with SolarCity on airport projects. You may know Greg from his former role as President and CEO of the Airport Council International North America. He served in that role for 8 years. I'm pleased to have them both with us today, and I'm going to turn the reins over to Kate. But before I do, I want to address just a couple of housekeeping issues. We have all attendees on mute. Throughout the presentation, you can ask questions in two ways. You can raise your hand electronically. On the right side of your screen, there's a hand. If you double-click that, we will see that you have a question. Or you can type in your question, and we will pause at that point, read the question aloud, and have our panelists answer them, and then move on with the presentation. Thank you very much. Without further ado, Kate Sherwood.
Hi, thank you so much, Mark. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. It's the opening screen for the solar opportunity for New York airports. As an agenda today, first I'd like to introduce myself and my fellow speaker here today, Greg Principato, talk about what the solar opportunity is for New York airports, the New York Sun Initiative, which is a New York incentive program for solar financing options, the requirements for success. Greg will talk about siting solar at airports at a high level. I'll talk a little bit about SolarCity, who NYSEC's partner is, the solar evaluation process, and talk about some project highlights. Please feel free to ask questions throughout, and we will actually answer them at the end, as mentioned earlier. So who's on the phone today? I am Kate Sherwood. I'm our Director of Commercial Partners here at SolarCity. SolarCity, we are the nation's largest provider of clean energy power through solar and renewable energy solutions. And as Mark mentioned earlier, we are NYSEC's preferred provider for solar procurement. Also on the phone with me here today, we've got Greg Principato. He's a senior advisor at National Strategies, and he's also the former president of the Airports Council of America, or Airports Council International North America. So what is the solar opportunity for New York airports? Solar provides an economic and sustainability opportunity for New York airports. The way that this happens really is that there are incentives that I'll talk about here in a minute from the New York Sun Initiative. Governor Cuomo has announced these recently. PPA financing, power purchase agreement financing options, allow airports to go solar with no money down or no upfront capital investment, and literally to save money from day one, and then actually install clean, affordable energy at the airport site, or even through nearby sites that the airport might own, and actually reduce energy expense from day one. So what is the New York Sun Initiative? This initiative, as recently announced by Governor Cuomo, it makes solar affordable for New York airports and really for a lot of folks in New York. It is a public-private partnership that will invest over $800 million in solar. It was first passed in 2012, and it provides incentives through 2015 and even recently announced beyond that. It provides commercial scale power users in most utility territories in New York, excluding Long Island and NYPA customers. But if you are in the New York ISO load zones A through J, and you're not a NYPA customer, then you are eligible for these incentives. And the purpose is to actually promote development of distributed renewable energy in New York State. As I mentioned, the significant incentives for solar projects are supposed to drive growth in the solar industry in the state. The method is declining incentives for solar in New York. It is administered by NYSERDA, and there are two basic incentive programs. One is the small to medium scale, and one is the large scale. The small to medium scale provides incentives for solar systems up to 200 kilowatts per utility meter. It's an open enrollment. Applications are accepted first come, first serve, and it's an upfront incentive or a dollar per watt incentive. But really, the real value for airports comes in the large-scale system incentive programs. These are for systems from 200 kilowatts to 2 megawatts or 2,000 kilowatts per meter. It's a reverse auction, is the administration process. Applications are accepted 2 or 3 times a year, with the next one approximately this July, and we expect, though we don't know, that the future incentive program this year will be approximately September or October. And this provides a performance-based incentive or a rebate per kilowatt hour. And the most exciting thing about it for New York airports is that it allows remote net metered projects to be eligible. Quick comment, remote net metered projects means that you're allowed to site the solar project in one location, perhaps an unused field or some place available to the airport, and literally remote net meter or credit the solar energy produced at that site back to meters that may be on perhaps the main airport site, for example. This large project incentive, just a little more details about it. It's going to provide $60 million in incentives this year. It is proportioned out into the 3 major utility regions of upstate New York, the Hudson Valley, and New York City. Again, not Long Island and not NYPA customers. Again, it's a competitive bid process or reverse auction. In 2013, the average winning bid was about 29 cents per kilowatt hour. Again, that's an incentive of 29 cents per kilowatt hour credited towards the solar energy produced. We are expecting the next auction to be coming up this July. And what's needed for the large project to enter into the large project PON or program offering notification? First, you need a non-binding letter of intent with a solar provider, someone like a SolarCity. You need a utility letter of authorization. So your local utility must provide the letter of authorization, and there's a form that that's available for that. They need to see all utility bills for all of the meters that will be offset by the solar energy. If there are rooftop systems like this site shown in the picture, if there are rooftop systems, then we, the solar company, need to provide a preliminary structural analysis. And then the solar provider is required to prepare everything else. These packages in print end up being approximately 1 inch thick, but there's engineering and permitting and administrative requirements to receive the incentive. Again, your solar provider, someone like a SolarCity, could do all of the work for you for this. And what are financing options for solar? There are two basic ways that solar is procured by airports nationwide today. On the left, you can see that you can purchase the system, and on the right is the concept of a power purchase agreement. When you purchase a system, as in any capital purchase, you pay an upfront cost for the system, and the energy savings pay off that cost of system over time. The problem with purchasing a system as a municipality or municipal airport is that you probably do not qualify for some very valuable federal tax incentives. The solar industry allows ourselves, or there's a 30% investment tax credit available to solar, and municipal entities simply can't use that federal tax credit. So many municipalities actually finance their systems through a power purchase agreement. Essentially, this is where we, as the solar provider, finance the system. Essentially, it's free or no upfront cost for you, and we then agree to sell you the power at a lower rate for solar electricity than you're currently paying your utility. So basically, what the solar power purchase agreement does, again, is it allows no upfront capital investment, immediate savings for day one, in exchange for an agreement to buy that solar energy at a price lower than you're currently paying for your utility costs today. How does that actually work? SolarCity would install and maintain a solar system on site. You, as an airport manager, would simply host the system and pay for the electricity produced and used. There's no upfront cost, really an immediate payback. SolarCity, as a tax-paying entity, can fully leverage the federal government incentives and depreciation, lowering the overall PPA price. The reduced electricity cost is really a combination of the new lower utility bill and the PPA payments. And then essentially, our goal is to lock in that electric rate for the next 20 years. We can agree on an annual escalation. Many municipalities prefer a low annual increase or escalation of about 0 to 3%. And this really protects you, the ratepayer, against utility rate escalation and price spikes. So what are requirements for success with a solar project? There are really three primary factors: location, incentives, and the current electric prices that you're paying today. We already really talked about the incentives available in New York, the New York Sun incentive program for solar projects. Location and electric prices are also important. In terms of location, there are three basic siting options for solar: ground, roof, and carport. Ground mount systems are the least expensive and often the best option for remote net metered projects. Carports are the most expensive simply because there's more steel involved in putting carports solar up above cars. And often in New York, we do find that carports may or may not pencil or make economic sense. And then rooftops are good because they can use available space and can create efficient on-site production if there's enough space available. The key there is occasionally rooftops are cluttered with rooftop units, HVAC units, and other things that are already on the rooftop, making it not really available for solar. You can see here an example, some estimated examples of the mounting type and the system size and the year one production and space needed for different types of solar mounting systems. A very rough rule of thumb at a high level is that solar takes between in terms of a wattage, solar produces about 7 to 10 watts per square foot. Here's where the location plus available incentives plus current electric prices determine feasibility or economic feasibility for a solar project. Really, in New York, because there's a reverse auction for the NYSERDA incentives, balancing a low PPA price against the probability of winning the NYSERDA incentive is key. Estimated values you can see below. The savings that are shown here are compared to all-in electric prices because solar, even if it's remote net metered, is considered behind the meter or on-site generation. You should compare the current price that you're paying for electricity versus a year one price that you might pay to a solar provider such as SolarCity. And you can see the probability of receiving the NYSERDA incentives. If it's an 80% probability or a high probability, your year one price with a 0% escalator and a 20-year term would be, depending on location and depending on the incentives available, 6 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour. We, SolarCity, do find that many New York ratepayers are paying more than this per kilowatt hour, and therefore solar can be an economically viable, economically attractive option. So, citing solar at airports. Here I'd like to turn the voice discussion over to my counterpart, Greg Principato. Greg, are you still there?
I'm here. Thank you very much. Let me do two things. Let me start by making sort of a large point and then bring it down. And it's great to have the opportunity to talk to airport folks again. It's a highlight of my career to work for ACI North America and lead it for 8 years. 7 years ago, when I was at ACI, I asked our environmental committee to develop a set of environmental goals for our board to approve, and including renewables and other issues. And I have to admit that I did it not for economic reasons at that point in time, but for political reasons. I saw what had happened in Europe. I saw what seemed to be happening here politically, and I wanted us to be ahead of the game. Our environmental committee brought, as you would expect from a group of environmental folks at airport departments, brought in a very ambitious set of goals. And of course, our board pushed back some were receptive, some were not. This is in 2007. I had one board member come up to me, ran a large hub airport at the time in the northern part of the country, and told me my job was to keep this stuff away from him. So I got a mixed reaction. But then our finance committee got a hold of all this, the ACI finance committee, all the CFOs, and I don't know if John's on the call, but the former CFO from Albany was one of the leaders of that committee, but got a hold of this. And we were entering an economic downturn not long after that. Everybody was trying to cut costs. Everybody was worried about losing air service. And on the commercial side, the GA airports, of course, were trying to continue to be viable for their communities. I worked in state government earlier in my career for a governor of the state of Virginia, or the Commonwealth of Virginia, as we call it. And I would know how important both commercial service and GA airports are to the economic future of any state or community. And the finance committee got a hold of it and started looking at it in a very different way, whether it was solar or other renewables, talk about sustainability and economic benefit. And eyes were opened and things began to turn. And as I've talked to airport executives about this issue, both when I was at ACI, and I've talked to a lot of them since I left, the light bulb always goes off when we get around to talking about economics for the reasons that Kate was just talking about, and that's airports large and small. I've talked to CEOs recently of very large hub airports and CEOs of very, very small airports with just a departure or two a day and everybody in between. I think having worked both at ACI and the Virginia state government, they have a pretty good idea of what people are receptive to, folks are listening to. I could see the ground shifting on this matter. The response I got from some people 7 years ago, largely because of the economics of it, has totally changed. I once had the board member of an airport, small hub airport, tell me, never tell me that I should do something as a board member of an airport because it's the right thing to do. I have a fiduciary responsibility to run the airport in an economically sustainable manner, and I have a responsibility to my community that the airport can bring in air service or be a viable general aviation airport. Tell me how I can make those things happen. And solar has become a real big part of that. And Kate's already talked about, I think, the importance of the area of the country where you live and the incentives and the governor's commitment and all the other things that you have. I can tell you from talking to airports around the country that a lot of people are envious, really, of the situation that the New York airports are in terms of having the availability of these kinds of programs and incentives. And just to sort of bring it down, a lot of people tend to think that, this is an exotic thing, and certainly that was the response I got back in 2007 when we really started pushing the overall broader discussion. But if you look at, a lot of people thought, well, this is fine for San Francisco or Seattle or maybe Boston, but what about me? You look at places like Indianapolis, Fresno. I know Fresno's in California, but if you've ever been there, that community has a lot more in common, I think, with upstate New York than it does with San Francisco, and they've put in an excellent facility there. Talking to people like Ann Crook and Carl Beardsley from upstate New York, I don't know if either are on the webinar, but I know that they're looking at it. In talking to a number of folks, who might have looked at this 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago in the past and said, we looked at renewables, we looked at solar specifically, it's just too hard, or the economics didn't work, and Kate talked about some of the reasons, as a municipality, you can't take advantage of some things that maybe some others can on the tax side. They're taking another look at it and seeing that it does, that it does pencil, that it does work, and that it can be a real part of a strategy to control costs. You have a lot of, you talk to, I remember the CEO at Massport once told me, it doesn't matter how much air service I lose, I've still got all these costs. It doesn't matter. And GA Airport, you're in the same situation. It doesn't matter how many based aircraft you might have or whatever, you still have those costs. And this is a way not only to get those costs under control as a cushion against bad times, but also a way to get these costs you're going to have no matter what under better control, to better enable you to attract air service, to better enable you to serve your communities, to better enable you to be a viable general aviation airport option, and really increase the ability of your community to use your facility as a magnet for economic growth. So obviously, as we get to the end of it, if people have any questions, specific questions about this for me, I'd be happy to chat about that. But I wanted to give you that broader perspective, and then bring it down into a more on the ground perspective, that there are people who run airports very similar to the ones you run around the country that are not only looking at this as a viable option, but either are implementing it or have implemented it.
Thank you, Greg. And Greg, at a high level, really there are many airports, as you mentioned, have installed solar. Fresno in California, Denver in Colorado. SolarCity has clients including the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, of course, federal facility, and the Kona Airport in Hawaii. The FAA does obligate airports to meet certain minimum standards. This includes the design, operation, and maintenance of airfield facilities, the management of obstructions in the vicinity, and the clearance of safety-critical design surfaces. But at a high level, there are multiple examples of where the FAA has ruled that solar panels provide no more glare than vegetation. That's almost a little surprising, but go ahead, Greg.
Well, that's right, and you know, yeah, obviously the FAA is a lot of airport managers like to say FAA stands for Forces Against Aviation sometimes, but you often have to go through the FAA to do almost anything. You know, I think that has been one of the reasons a lot of people have sort of shied away from it. But you know, number one, the evidence is a lot of people have installed it, and you know, number two, if you look at, you know, you do these glare studies and so forth. I know that there was a celebrated case of an airport where they had to make some changes in New England not all that long ago, and the problem there was that the glare study that was done some years back was done using techniques that are out of date now and so forth. And you know, it's not hard to do. You know, you do have to jump through some hoops, but airport managers, I think you all are used to jumping through a hoop whenever you want to do anything with the FAA. And certainly these, you know, rules about instructions and obstructions and so forth are all well known by airport managers. And I don't think there's anything. I can tell you from talking to a lot of people who are putting this in place that there's nothing in any kind of FAA rule or anything that really should stand in the way of your being able to successfully do this.
Thank you, Greg. And for those that are interested in going knee-deep on this information, the FAA has issued both technical guidance and an interim policy on solar, and the links, as you can see, are in this presentation, and we're happy to share that after this call. SolarCity is a company.
And certainly I know many of you are involved either in ACI or AAAE, and you know, they're working through that. You know, we're working with them. They have a lot of material as well, and tips on getting through the process.
Yeah, practically from a SolarCity perspective, if we were to enter into a power purchase agreement, the nit-nats of actually literally dotting the I's and crossing the T's on any solar installation at an airport would be our responsibility. We would ask to work with you, of course, and you know, have any reasonable assistance in terms of agreement on documents that the FAA might require. But as you can see from the example here in Kona Airport in Hawaii, we have installed a 122 kilowatt array. That was quite challenging because it was literally installed on a lava field in Hawaii. We've also done actually 10 other airports in Hawaii, Kona, Lihue, Kauai. Hawaii, as you may imagine, has very high energy costs, and so they were an early customer of SolarCity's, and we've gotten a lot of airports done there. Anything further on that, Greg?
No, I think we've covered it.
Thanks. So, real quick, so you know who SolarCity is. We are, as I think Mark mentioned earlier, NISAC's preferred provider for solar procurement. We have a pre-bid procurement vehicle through MEGA, and we're happy to explain how that works and how that might support your solar procurement process. As a company, we are a publicly traded company, and we are the national leader in clean energy services. We have both residential and commercial customers, over 82,000 nationwide, over 1,000 commercial and municipal scale customers, over 400 megawatts deployed, and we are operating in 15 states today. Our customers, as you saw earlier, include the airports, the Department of Transportation of Hawaii, the U.S. Air Force. We have over 5,000 employees, and then because our business model is financing, owning, and operating solar systems, we've raised over $1.7 billion for solar projects in structured financing to date. Really, the benefit of our integrated approach is that we are a single source for the project development, financing, all the way through engineering, installation, and ongoing operations and maintenance. We are the one throat to choke from the beginning when you first start speaking to us all the way through the ongoing operations and maintenance. We have 3 locations in New York State, in Albany, in Elmsford, and on Long Island. And we are rapidly expanding our presence in New York State as the partnership with NISAC evidences. You can see this map of the United States is also a bit of a map of where solar is economically viable, or solar pencils. So you can, as you can imagine, we have operation centers in both Nevada and California, and 3 in New York State, and expanding rapidly wherever solar really makes economic sense. So what is the process? Really, the solar project development process starts with interest that may be generated on calls like this, and starts then with a solar consultation. We discuss the goals, have a site analysis, and we can provide a high-level quote. Then we go to a project estimate. We actually do a full financial analysis, a design mock-up, and we actually at that point traditionally sign a letter of intent. In New York, that letter of intent would be a non-binding letter of intent that would be submitted into the NYSERDA auction. In New York, again, yeah, your NYSERDA auction entry would go at about step 2. Then we would do a final proposal with a full engineering site audit, a final project estimate, and actually execute a binding contract. Again, the mega procurement vehicle is available to municipalities of New York State. We would then do a full system design, a structural and electrical design, do a building permit or a site permit as required by your local authority having jurisdiction, or AHJ. Obviously, while all of this works with you, we would then move into the installation phase where there's on-site construction, a city or AHJ authority having jurisdiction inspection of the project, and the interconnection to the local power grid. From there, then, you would actually receive ongoing monitoring and maintenance. You could review your solar production, your on-site energy consumption at those same meters, compare where the solar production is offsetting your on-site energy consumption, and actually be able to have reports on, really the kilowatt hours you're saving, and from there you can run your financial analysis. The ongoing monitoring, as I mentioned earlier, it is expected that these are 20-year long-term projects, so that goes on for a long period of time. Now I'd like to just show you some project highlights of other projects that we've done for municipal clients nationwide. Here's our first client actually is a federal client, the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. You can see the large ground mount system on the left actually is, well, it's not in, of course, the initial airfield strip, but it's very close to where the airplanes actually land. And we have both ground mount and residential rooftops at that location. In your neck of the woods in East Bridgewater, Massachusetts, the town of East Bridgewater, we've recently announced a ground mount project that's been completed for 2.5 megawatts, very similar to a ground mount that might be installed in your area. Intel, and we've got it as a large commercial client with multiple campuses in California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Oregon. And there you can see examples of the different mounting system types: carport shading some cars, a ground mount system, and some rooftop panels. The city of Lancaster, California has installed over almost 2 megawatts across 5 sites with carports and rooftops. Let me show a funny example of where not to install solar. If you can see my cursor in the top right of the screen, you'll see that there's a solar installation near a baseball field. And unfortunately, foul balls have actually damaged the solar panels. In that case, we do exchange the solar panels for clean, unbroken solar panels, because we own and operate the system, so the requirements for maintenance are ours. I don't think we'd do that so close to a baseball field again. Sacramento, we've done the water treatment plants, almost 2 megawatts of ground mount project atop a capped water reservoir and rooftop systems. Glastonbury, Connecticut, you can see snow does fall near and around solar panels, and that's perfectly fine. And you can see that this is a 610 kilowatt rooftop and ground mount system in the town of Glastonbury, Connecticut. And that is it in terms of the presentation. My contact information and Greg's is here on the screen. I think now we can open it up for questions.
Great. And I also want to extend, if anybody would like to contact me, my email is mlevine@nisac.org. If you have any questions for NISAC. We have 2 questions in so far. The first is, there are some areas of New York State that get a lot of snow. How does the solar panel work when there's 6 inches to 24 inches of snow coming down in the storm?
Thanks, Mark. I'll take that question. First off, the solar system and the panels are, well, physically, let me answer the direct question first. Physically, when the solar panels are covered by something such as snow, they do not create energy, simply because the sun cannot reach them. Same would be true even if just clouds were in front of the sun. But the solar panels actually do create a small amount of heat as they're producing electricity. And literally, as you can see from some of the photos shown earlier, the panels are traditionally tilted between 10 to 20 degrees. So the snow, as a little bit of light makes it through to the solar panel, the snow actually ends up melting off, faster even than it melts off around the surrounding areas. And so the solar panels simply melt the snow off over time and produce energy as they begin touching the sun again. In upstate New York, we know that there can be days, weeks, sometimes even long winters where the snow is there for quite a long period of time. And we assume the local solar conditions when we estimate the solar production. So a solar system in upstate New York, we know will not put out as much solar energy as a solar system in Tucson, Arizona. Simply put, you don't get as much sunshine falling on you as in Tucson and Davis Monthan Air Force Base. So when we initially estimate the solar production up front, we know what the local weather service for the past 30 years has seen in terms of the local weather conditions, and we estimate that into the solar production up front.
Okay, the next question, and possibly the last, is so if our board wants to move forward with this, what are the next steps?
Well, here at SolarCity, I would encourage you to get in touch with myself, and I've got colleagues that are based in New York that are from upstate themselves that I would put you in contact with, probably someone named Jen Jacob or Dan Leary, and they would discuss, as the process showed, they would discuss with you your specific goals, and depending on where you are in the process, if you know what sites at your airport are available, they would literally move into the quote phase and provide you with a feasibility analysis, both from an engineering or technical perspective as well as a site perspective, as well as an economic perspective. They would then be available to you to work with MEGA if you chose to procure through the MEGA procurement vehicle, or depending on whatever kind of procurement you need to perform, they're available to support you in that. And SolarCity, really, through the MEGA procurement vehicle, again, we've already competitively been bid out, but we're happy to provide the contact and the further information on how that meets municipal procurement requirements in New York State. But our team is here to support you through the entire process, making it as easy as possible to actually go solar.
And I can tell, this is Greg, I can tell the person whoever it was asked that question, that as I've put some airport folks in touch with SolarCity around the country, I can testify that the folks from SolarCity really take that ball and tuck it under their arm and run hard with it, and it's been a very easy, painless process for the airports that have gotten involved.
Thank you, Greg.
Well, to extend that metaphor, we're pleased with our partnership with SolarCity and MEGA, and we plan to score some touchdowns with our counties. So thank you very much, Greg, and thank you, Kate. This is a very informative webinar, and if our participants have any questions, you have the contact information. Please reach out to us. Thank you, and have a great day.